Hello everyone, I'm going to be going over the map strategy for Klondike here. It's the newest Grand Battles map in World of Tanks for PC, and yeah, you don't really see too many guides out here for Klondike. I finally have mine finished, which there's a link in the video description below, and also at the end of the video to bring you over to the written article. But this video I'm going to be going over just the basic strategies and stuff that you'll see in random battles on Klondike. Levi has one of his toys here. So first off, starting out with the main areas on Klondike. There's three main areas, and each area I kind of divided it into like a small little subsection as well. So more or less with Klondike, if I can point you over to the very large, this is part of the written map strategy guide. You have the island in the south. Wargaming kind of coined that term, and I kept it with that. But just above it, there's what I'm calling the river fork, since the river essentially splits into two around the island. But the main flank down there is the island, which you're going to see a lot of fighting just south of it. In the center, you have the bridge, and also just north of it, what I'm calling the river source, since that's kind of the end of it. And you know, the bridge, you're not going to see too much fighting there in the center, but I'll get to that later. And then in the north, you finally have the mining town, which is outside of the island, the other area on the map where early on a lot of fighting is going to be going on. So winning either or both the island and mining town is pretty important. And then all the way at the top of the map is what I'm calling the train station, since there's a train up there and a little station for it. That's kind of the least, you know, important flank in a way, but it still can help flanking like the mining town. But let's get down to things here. I'm going to pull up the strategy first without the labels over it. You can kind of see drawn out before I go flying around to different areas here. Going towards the south, both sides have pretty much the same layout around the island there. The team that I'm starting on and flying to, that starts in the north, that's outlined in yellow. The southern team's blue, to where virtually they have the same chances to win the island. And then the little orange outline areas in the center are useful spots to kind of push to after, you know, you initially set up. The center, even though I have like little routes outlined there, it's not the best area to go to early on. That's because it's pretty wide open. To actually push anywhere meaningful, you're probably going to get shot from like people camping around a base, artillery, or you're going to get like picked off from one of the other flanks. But it, you know, putting a couple tanks towards the center around the bridge, you know, maybe a TD or two or a light or a medium, just to keep, you know, enemies from passing through unseen, it's definitely useful. But you don't want to put like 10 tanks there. It's gonna, you know, definitely backfire. And then finally, you know, in the upper left here, the mining town, more or less both sides have same opportunities here to win it. Has the most cover from outside SPG fire, since usually SPGs are located, you know, more towards the south on this map. But more or less, that's where you're going to see a lot of brawling going. Make sure you side scrape off the building, stuff like that. And then lights can kind of fight a little bit further up near the train station. But let me swap off that way we can see. But getting down to business here, so starting from this side, you know, there's a lot of like dead space, at least early on this side and also the other side, where artillery, pretty much the gist of it is, if you want to support the south, kind of set up more towards the south here. If you want to support the north, do the same thing, you know. And definitely keep an eye on if a flank's failing or not, because you're going to want to kind of get behind the stronger flank so you don't get caught off guard. But starting off here, you split into three teams. The center team really has the best decision whether to go north or south. If you spawn north, spawn south, you should probably stick there, or else you're going to miss out on good spots early on. I'm going to start off going towards the island now. The most important spot to kind of support from is right near the lighthouse here. You can kind of sit back here. There's not a lot of bushes, but there is a little bit of hard cover. But sitting back here, you won't be spotted unless the enemy pushes up to this little ridge here, or they start flanking from somebody somewhere else. But early on, you can get decent shots on any enemies pushing right around this area, or if you set up a little bit further back here out in the open. But moving up to the important area where you can traverse right up to the deep water here. So these rocks, even though they look like they're not always in the playable area, you can actually kind of set up behind them. But most people are going to want to push right behind the buildings here. Most of the fighting on the island, I'm just going to rotate so I can do both sides here. It's pretty much symmetrical to where most of the fighting is going to occur off of these two corners here. And if you have some tanks, you can scoot along here, because unless you're in a really tall tank, you actually can't shoot very well down here, to where you can actually get a couple tanks down in this area. And you're definitely going to be trading shots here, and the tanks supporting you, because the enemy has a ridge very similar without a lighthouse, but it serves the same function. You're going to be basically brawling it out here. Now, the important thing to do, regardless of what side you're on, is if your team, it looks like you're evenly matched and you're not just completely outnumbering the enemy, it's almost better to let the enemy tanks push through. So from this side, setting up, behind the rocks here, you have some support tanks, and maybe like a tank here, a couple tanks here. The enemy is going to funnel through. They're safe from Artie and the tanks behind you back here on the mini map shooting at you. They're safe pushing through here. However, once they get to this little area, you can actually shoot through some of this pier and hit them before they can actually shoot you. If they decide to push this way, they're just gonna, they're gonna disappear very quickly from Artie, tank destroyer, stuff like that. So it's actually worthwhile to set up, not push too hard, and let the enemy kind of make the first move. If you're not, if there's only like you have one or two tanks here, you're probably not going to be able to defend it well unless you have a lot of support. But if you have a ton of tanks, then maybe try to push. Otherwise, if it looks like it's a normal circumstance with most of your people coming down here, you're not short-handed or heavy-handed, just kind of let the enemy make the first push, because you're going to get a lot of damage on, and then you make your push after that. Now, pretty much that's cut and dry. You're brawling in this little area. A couple tanks can get down further towards the water and try to get a little bit more of a different angle shooting them, but more or less very easy area to understand and fight on. Now, what complicates things, this is what I was calling the river fork up here, where it's not exactly connected, but that's what I went with. The island has this center area, which to get to it, it's very exposed. However, the TDs and whatnot can fire on tanks heading here, but most of the time they're preoccupied pointing down this way. So you can sneak through here as long as you make it, pretty quickly when you make your move. However, initially, there isn't much cover. So coming from this side, you have a little bit of cover from, tanks back here, but Artie's going to be able to hit you pretty easily. And the slope here isn't much. So tanks with like 8 degrees of gun depression are able to fight off of this pretty effectively. So having at least a few tanks here is pretty important, because to win the island here a little bit further south, usually it comes down to whoever wins this little center area. So fighting out here, coming from this side, you're going to want to, be aware of any tanks in this area. And then once you're, if you're trying to push across, you can get hit from here. Otherwise, your main threat, if you're making your way a little bit further out, are tanks towards the bridge here. Because they're going to be like, there's nobody near the bridge. So they turn their attention towards you. Coming from this side, it's pretty much the same thing, to where unless you're pushing across the center, you're not going to get hit from here until you're kind of halfway through. So going here in like a heavy tank with a little bit of gun depression, you know, say a TD like the T110E3, the Badger, which I'm in this battle. I'm not going to play the whole battle though. Medium tanks, even lights can be worthwhile. Once you get up to this area though, both sides have two different little overwatch points where you can proxy spot, say coming from this team, you can proxy spot enemies back here. You can also just get enough view range, putting yourself here to spot the support tanks. But poking out here, you definitely need a bit of frontal armor because you're going to be spotted yourself. Even though there's some bushes, you're close enough to where most enemy tanks are to where you're going to be proxy spotted. So don't poke out here unless you have a lot of armor or you think you can get a quick shot off. But it is important to get this area, because while you're not going to be influencing, saying like the brawl that's happening here, you're going to be spotting the tanks behind that, and your RD is going to be able to hit them. Your tanks are going to be able to shoot them without just taking damage from, you know, unspotted tanks the entire time. Otherwise, though, the only other little thing about this area, which let me bring up the strategy here and replace the mini map, is there's two little orange sections located right here, coming from the northern spawn, and right behind this little hill coming from the southern spawn. So I outlined them because if you do decide to push over and not go up to the center, you can actually position yourself behind the hills, shooting enemy tanks, say position there, or coming from the side that I spawn on. This has a little bit more cover because it's a little bit taller. You can shoot enemy tanks here. You are going to be shot back, however, you are largely already safe and you're not going to get hit from tanks sitting further back. After that, you know, pushing through, this map's so large, with any 30v30 map, it's really a crapshoot what you do after the initial fight. So there is cover pushing out of either side in the form of little refineries, but you know, there's no way to really draw a conclusion what you're going to be doing, you know, on a lot of battles, since it's going to play out a lot differently each time. Now moving towards the center here, just remove the mini map. You have the bridge, which, as you can see, there's not too much cover. There's a little bit in the form of a ridge that protects you from the south, and that's where you're going to find say TDs and stuff. Bringing back the strategy, TDs kind of sitting up here to shoot and kind of support the south. However, you know, both sides have this area. You're not really going to see people pushing across because you're going to die. You might see a few people going underneath the bridge and trying to work their way up, but it's not great early on because you're going to get slowed down from the soft terrain. You're going to be getting shot most likely from the south, and also, say the enemy team wins the mining town quickly, you're going to be getting shot from the north. There's little overwatch positions. Luckily, they don't point too much towards the center, but you're basically going to get shot up on the bridge area. But it is decent to have a tank or two to be able to support the little river fork area. Just above the bridge, you know, this is what I'm calling the river source. So you have a little bit of cover right in the center. Pushing down here, of course, you know, you're going to lose a little bit of mobility being soft ground, but you do have cover to kind of, you know, brawl, fight close range against whatever you're going to come across here. And, you know, kind of exiting here, both sides have a little bit of cover from SPGs firing on you, as you can kind of work down, say, like a tank destroyer sitting here. And the same thing, you have a rock here, and you can kind of work down anyone hiding in this area. Early on, I wouldn't suggest really going here. You know, say right off the bat, first 30 seconds, you know, if you're in a light, maybe spot around the area, but pushing down here, there's not too much to gain, only because the likelihood of, say you even make it through, you know, really pushing out after here, unless you're in a light, you can take out Artie sometimes and slip through, but more or less, you know, you're going to be running into a lot of people camping, and people that don't know Klondike yet, they're going to be kind of sitting back near the base. TDs and stuff, and you're probably going to die because it's not like your team's going to push like 5, 6, 7 tanks through the center in the beginning. Most people go towards the north and the south. Later on, though, it is a good route to be able to get around to, say, flank the north, or, you know, push through and help clean up the south, kill their arty, stuff like that. But early on, there's not too much to gain here. Now, there is an access point. It's very exposed, so early on, it's, again, not good to take this. It's more of a exit. Pulling up the little mini map I have drawn up, the little arrows I have here mainly are pointing down because I wouldn't advise pushing up. You're going to lose speed, and most likely you're going to take damage unless it's later on in a match and you know you're not going to get spotted. But the mining town here, finally for this flank, again, it's a little bit hard to outline every single, say, spot tactic to use. So I'm just breaking down like the basics here, because the way 30v30 maps work, with 30 players on each side, more or less, you know, you want to kind of set up in the standard spots, but after the first couple minutes, each match, excuse me, is going to be completely different from one another. So there's a lot of different tactics you can use, but it all depends on how the map's kind of playing out. So the mining town here. So coming from, let's start with the side that I was spawning on here. You'll notice that the buildings are set up in a way where they're not 100% symmetrical. So pushing, pushing from the north going south here, you're going to see you have some buildings and different little stuff for refineries to set up behind. However, pushing in here, you'll notice there's a little notch out when these buildings kind of combine here, to where you can push a little bit further up this specific path coming north to south and still have enough cover to kind of fight and hopefully push through. If you're not in a really fast tank or a fast heavy or a tank with a lot of armor, you don't want to do that until you know if there's enemies kind of set up in this area, because coming from the opposite side, the enemy team, their kind of little notch out is located over here, to where enemies will kind of instinctively, you know, set up here in the beginning, maybe a couple behind the little piles, but more or less you're going to find maybe an enemy on this side, but most kind of funnel in on this side, whereas the other side coming up, you instinctively kind of go towards this side. But enemy tanks coming from the south going north set up here, and you can actually, if there's not a lot of enemies protecting this, get yourself pushed into where this is kind of going to protect you from artillery, and then work your way forward. You know, the mining town's pretty straightforward. Take smart risks, like don't push fast and, you know, end up just getting smacked by, say, like a Jagdpanzer 100 or something. You know, it's kind of just like leapfrogging and brawling, side scraping, you know, and trading shots well. Artillery can hit you, but it's not, you know, it's not the most arty favorable spot on the map. It has a decent amount of cover. The only arties that are able to hit you, say looking from this flank, say you're an enemy tank in this area, are SPGs setting up here, or if they're like way in the south for whatever reason, shooting in the north. And if you're coming from this side, you know, the SPGs might be set up in this area shooting you. Finally, though, the train station. This is kind of the wild card flank, to where you're not going to really want to go up here in a heavy tank because it's kind of out of the way. You can go up here, but, you know, it's going to definitely be risky. If your team loses the mining town, you're basically screwed. But coming up from both sides, there's no real reason to stick around this area unless you're kind of helping support if enemies are pushing through. But you're actually not able to shoot very effectively, if at all, down into the mining town from here. They put, you know, rocks, boulders, little buildings and stuff, train station, up here, so you actually can't shoot down into the mining town. You can kind of proxy spot if enemies are close to here, but you can't influence it at all unless you get all the way through the flank. Now, looking at the train station flank here, you know, it's pretty much a straight on fight. You'll see lights up here, some medium tanks, occasionally heavies, but I think it's more important to be down here in a heavy tank, unless it's like a really mobile heavy, say like a 113 or something. But more or less, you have a little bit of cover here. Arty's still going to be able to hit you. You can set up this way, no Arty protection, but more or less it's just a straight shot. Whatever you're encountering up here, you want the better numbers on your side, because unless you get lucky, you know, usually the side with more amount of tanks, since it's tier 10 only for grand battles, it's going to win. But coming from either side, say coming from the north flank, heading south, which let me remove that for a second. So say you're coming from the north pushing south, it's pretty wide open pushing out of here. So if there's a lot of, say, TDs camping back here for some reason, you're gonna have to go through them. So that's where winning this flank, it could be very important. But say after you win it, there's a bunch of heavies or TDs staring at you. It's, you know, it's a risk you kind of have to take, but the upside is it provides an easy flank to help the mining town, and you also can just have a straight shot towards enemy SPGs. The northern side, so if you're pushing from the south here, is a little bit different, to where they actually do have a little bit more cover here, not from SPGs, but from tanks pushing through the center. They have a little bridge here to where, you know, either just push through it. Going over it, though, you're going to be pretty exposed. You know, it's your choice, but really it's just a little bit different. Just don't fall off the bridge. I'm sure I'll do that at some point, but there is a little bit more cover to set up here. So if there are TDs camping back here for whatever reason, don't know why there would be, but you never know, there is a little bit more cover on this side to basically set up, shoot any enemies here. But the main goal to, you know, winning this flank is to eventually help win the mining town by flanking it, to where you don't have to, say, push through like 10 heavy tanks or something. But in the grand scheme of Klondike, it's one of the, you know, right now it's one of two. I was gonna say one of the better grand battles map. It's not hard because there's only two of them, but to me it's a pretty well balanced grand battles map. It is very large, to where the outcome, it largely rests on, you know, winning the north and winning the south, so the island and the mining town. That's where most of the fighting usually happens. It's kind of designed to draw people in there, and, you know, winning one or both of those flanks is definitely in your best interest as a team. Now the center, that's kind of up in the air. It can be valuable early, but usually it's better to just kind of avoid it for now. Until later on, to where there's a little bit more wiggle room. Say you win the north, then it might be wise, instead of, say, pushing through, let me take this giant map strategy off. Say you're winning the north from this side, instead of pushing through, if they have a lot of like TD still lingering back here, if you're in a faster tank, maybe pop down this little access road and flank them from behind. You know, it's really a map about, yes, it's really concentrated going north and south, but it's balanced to where it's largely symmetrical for both teams, and there's a lot of different little routes that connect the different areas together. But hopefully, you know, you guys enjoyed this map strategy here. Again, at the end of this video, I'm sure it's going to be popping up here shortly, there's a link to the written article that goes over a little bit more in depth the tactics for each side and area over on my website, wattguru.com. But hopefully for anyone getting on Klondike here, this helped you learn a couple little areas, and yeah, hopefully you're not going to be one of the people, which I see it a lot when I'm on this map. There's people, you know, there's nothing wrong at times setting up here because you can get shots in the center, but sometimes you see like tank destroyers and stuff sitting all the way back in the base, and you know, it's such a large map, you're not able to actually hit anything. And let me just zoom over to the other team spawn spot, since I didn't kind of make it over there. It's set up a little bit differently, but more or less this area back here, it's largely dead space. Artillery is going to be back in this area like the other side, but until later on in the match, it's really no one should be back here except for an SPG. And even then, the SPGs should kind of fan out and get closer towards the flank. But anyway, thank you very much for watching this video. Hope you have a very nice day, and hopefully you get to see Klondike a little bit more. I haven't seen it a lot since the first few days it released, but it's a pretty fun map compared to whatever the hell the other Grand Battle map is. But anyway, have a nice one. Thanks for watching.